Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you all in Tallinn. I hope that those of you who were able to attend the dinner last night at the restaurant Tuljak really enjoyed it. Dear colleagues, this chairperson's meetings is a third meeting in the parliamentary dimension of the Estonian presidency of the Council of the European Union. For us, it's the only meeting that is not mandatory to hold at parliamentary level. We have chosen transport connections in Europe as a topic for a big conference because connectivity has direct and positive effects for business, passengers, and social cohesion. I'm sure we are going to hold fruitful discussions throughout the day. But before I introduce the agenda, dear colleagues, I'm pleased to give the floor to the President of the Riigikogu, Mr. Eiki Nestor, who would like to welcome you here on behalf of our Parliament. Please, Mr. President.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. A warm welcome to you all on behalf of the Parliament of Estonia. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you here in Estonian capital. I can imagine that not all of you have found it easy to travel to Tallinn. Many of you probably needed to change planes once or even twice, or our small population and geographical location on the edge of Europe are not particularly appealing to our airlines. There are probably other such regions, by the way, in the European Union too. My home village is on the island of Hiiumaa. Our rural municipality only has 1,200 inhabitants. In market conditions, no regular bus would service the route. In market conditions, we would have no way of getting on and off the island. Ferry lines are also subsidized. Whatever the location, economic growth always presumes reasonably comfortable access. We need to find a way to ensure the existence of high-quality flight connections in free aviation market conditions in those European regions where the flight connections that are needed for economic growth just will not develop on their own. Market integration, economic growth, and transport connectivity are strongly related. I hope that you have had the opportunity to take a walk around our historical center to admire the medieval buildings of Tallinn. All this has been built with the profits from the Hanseatic League trade. Estonia has a number of towns whose birth on rapid development is directly linked to the building of the railway more than 100 years ago. The importance of good transport connections as a precondition of development has by no means lessened. Industry settles where it finds plenty of transport connections. Moreover, it enables other sectors like trade, tourism, education, or culture to achieve their full potential. Consumers are strongly influenced by the availability and quality of transport services. In other words, transport is the engine of economic growth, and it helps to increase the competitiveness of the EU general. Therefore, common transport policy should remain an EU priority. Transport today is not only about infrastructure and mobility, it's also about innovation and sustainability. It is crucial to ensure the transport sector meets society's economic, social and environmental needs whilst minimizing their negative impacts on the environment. In addition, technology can contribute to the transport sector and help it become more sustainable. I'm glad that more and more companies across the world have become aware of the importance of sustainable business practices. This is why I'm very pleased to welcome also the representatives of Alstom, Hyperloop One and Rolls-Royce at this meeting. In conclusion, transport conditions also have a certain impact on your mindset. In ancient times, seafarers brought back new skills. We have learned words of one another. If we have good transport connections, people will travel more, communicate more, and finally understand each other better. This means that good transport connections also help to amplify the fundamental principles of the European Union: peace and mutual understanding. And finally, to have more light in such awful weather to your day, let me use the sentence made by my favorite composer, Frank Zappa. He made his own definition of the independent state. To have an independent state, you need an air company or beer. Sometimes you need a nuclear bomb, a football team, but at least you need a beer. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And now, dear colleagues, I would like to briefly recap the agenda and inform you of some practical issues. For decades, common transport policy has been one of the priorities of the European Union. And as a member state situated in a geographically periphery of the European Union, good transport connections are a priority for Estonia and for our presidency. We have divided our agenda into 3 sessions. First, EU transport policy for connecting Europe. The second, EU aviation strategy improving connectivity within and for Europe. And the third, I think very interesting, sustainable transport and innovation. What is the future of transport? To discuss these 3 important topics, we have invited the Commissioner for Transport, the Estonian Minister of Economic Affairs and Infrastructure, and high-level representatives from national parliaments, the European Parliament and the European Commission, and the private sector. Now some practical issues as well. Interpretation service are available in English, French, Polish, Italian, Turkish, Spanish, and of course Estonian. Please follow the instruction on your desks, where you will also find the information about the communication channels and how to access to Wi-Fi. For your information, this conference is being streamed live on the webpage in our parliamentary dimension, and you are most welcome to share your ideas and topics of this meeting on Twitter. When requesting the floor, please use the touchscreen in front of you. Please follow the instructions on your table. To register for a debate, please press just head button once on the conference unit. To withdraw your request from the list, press the head button again. The moderator will address you when it's your turn to take the floor. You are not required to press any buttons. The microphone will open and close automatically. Your conference unit will show the remaining time for your speech. All the relevant documents are available on the documents table just outside this hall. Please note that due to heritage protection requirements, food and drinks are not allowed in the meeting room. Water and coffee are served outside the plenary room during the whole conference. Also, please note that we will have a family photo after this first session, and lunch will be served after the second session. And finally, if you have any future questions, our staff is here and more than happy to assist you. Colleagues, let's move to the first session. In this session, we will discuss the EU transport policy for connecting Europe. We Europeans spend an average of 13% of our household income on transport. It's more than we spend on food or non-alcoholic drinks, and far more than we set aside for education. That is over €1 billion per year in EU. The European Union has a long-term vision on the development of a trans-European transport networks to make this experience faster and more convenient. Better connections enable citizens and businesses to fully benefit from well-functioning internal market. Within the next hour and a half, we will discuss a vital issue that directly affects every one of us. I'm looking forward to hearing your views to the main challenges we face in funding and implementing large cross-border transport projects in the EU. Let me now introduce our distinguished speakers for this session. The first speaker is Ms. Violeta Bulc, European Commissioner for Mobility and Transport. The second speaker is Ms. Kadri Simson, Minister of Economic Affairs and Infrastructure of the Republic of Estonia. And the third speaker is Ms. Karima Delli, the Chair of the Committee on Transport and Tourism of the European Parliament. And the debate will be moderated by Henrik Hololei, who is the Director General of DG Mobility and Transport in the European Commission. Colleagues, to remind you, you can now sign up for the debate already. And as I said previously, to register the debate, please press just the head button only once on the conference unit. And if you want to withdraw your request from the list, press the head button again. So let us make the best on our time today. Together. Today we have an excellent opportunity to having a distinguished panel and the chairpersons of the Economic Affairs Committee in the same room. Let's share our views and discuss the questions we face on the matter. Now I would like to warmly welcome our first speaker, Ms. Violeta Bulc. Dear Violeta, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Tere homikus, dobro jutro.
Good.
Close cooperation between all institutions is really essential for the further democratic development of the European Union. So I'm really honored and very happy that we can be here together, because only this way we can really move forward and make a difference and ensure prosperous development of all our nations. So today's topic that you decided to discuss, and thank you very much for putting it on the agenda, is transport and mobility and connectivity. And we know that without that, nothing else can move. And that's why it's so essential to really discuss it openly, to plan together and to move together in order to ensure that the single market works well, that we can really build on a value add of the European Union. And we're fully aware that transport is really largely responsible for that. Before I go into a very specific topic of investments, I would like to bring you on board on a bigger picture what we'd like to do in EU in the field of transport. And first, what are our two core objectives around all the legislation, all the initiatives are wrapped? First one is efficiency of European single transport market and transport union. And the second one is connectivity. They are very closely related, and we took all the measures against these two core objectives. But in order to really achieve them, we had to put the priorities, what we're going to focus our time and efforts and resources on. And the first one we picked is decarbonization. Transport is really causing more than 24% of the CO2 emissions in Europe, and it's still over 90% oil-based. So it was a relatively easy target to pick. But on the other hand, a lot of work to be done. So I'm inviting you to help us to really make all the proper moves to decarbonize European transport. The other one that seemed to be walking hand in hand with the decarbonization is digitalization. Transport has been severely underutilized in a digital sense. And you know today that if you want to achieve efficiency, you need to digitalize. You need to bring more efficient systems on board in order to manage better. And transport, for sure, is recognizing now that. So we're pushing on all levels, in all modes, to bring them on a digital level, either e-documents, single window, electronic tolling, or any other systems, CSR, ERTMS. You see that we are pushing on all modes now to bring them on a digital layer that we can start talking, thinking, and deploying integrated solutions in transport as well, and bring them in an integrated level with other portfolios, because today it's all about systemic approaches and all about horizontal integration as well. But of course, these two need to be driven by some higher motivations. And what we do now, and I'm inviting you to help us to really move into this direction, is that we put people and nature in the middle of our decision makings. So people focus, being social agenda for employers and employees, being much more aware of the needs in education and training, especially lifelong training, and also to put the services that serve European citizens and businesses at the core of our thinking, really started to shift the priorities and help us to clarify what we need to do first. And equally interesting and equally important focus is also the fourth enabler of growth, which is the internationalization of European solutions. We own more than 45% of green patents. We own more than 50% of autonomous patents, technologies that support autonomous transport. We need to sell them globally really well. So internationalization of all European solutions is the fifth important driver. But we would never be able to do that without pushing two that come as a power engine for all this that I spoke so far. And first one, innovation. So we are very much now focusing on what are the opportunities that we can really use our money wisely in order to support innovation, and how and where we need to intervene with financial and investment support. So all this is really the framework within which we work on an EU level. So please help us to really deploy it all the way to the last stakeholder, to the last citizen and the last business operation, that we can really generate needed participation, and we can really generate good solutions that we can capitalize in EU as well as globally. But now let me focus on investments a little bit more, especially in the spirit of the last 2 days. We've been here in Tallinn for the last 2 days, ministers from all, transport ministers, energy ministers, ministers from Eastern Partnership, a lot of important meetings. And the fil rouge of all these meetings was one topic: investments. In the spirit, of course, of the next MFF, that we are preparing, 2026, and in the spirit of the most efficient use of the current financial mechanisms. And as it was mentioned before in the opening remarks, the Connected Europe Facility mechanism, better known as CEF, has proven itself to be extremely useful. There was not a single minister or delegation that would not confirm that CEF really worked, not only for EU as a whole, but for every single member state as well. So it was also one of the core conclusions that we need to continue with that CEF needs to be expanded further, and that we need to see if there are other financial tools and mechanisms that can actually pick up the model of CEF, being more project-oriented, being more phase deployment-oriented, and get then better results and faster results down to all stakeholders and member states. And CEF mainly invests in sustainable modes such as rail, inland waterways, and short sea shipping, but it also promotes largely a model shift, accelerates the deployment of alternative fuels, and supports the development of intelligent transport systems. So it's very clear the motivation behind the CEF: clean, shared, and connected mobility that is safe and efficient, and that is the transport future. 3 calls for proposals have been launched through 2014-2016. They have been largely oversubscribed, around 3 times on average, and grants have been allocated to over 600 projects only in 3 years' time, carried out by more than 2,000 beneficiaries. By end of this year, 22.4 billion of CEF funds are expected to mobilize around 46.6 billion euros of total investments in EU, using already over 96% of the all CEF money available for transport in the form of a grant budget, including 1 billion euros of a blending call, which is a new type of financial tool that we developed in the last 2 years. We deployed it and used it, and this is in a record time. And that tells you how much it can be achieved where there is a genuine need and a real good motivation of all stakeholders to make a positive move. Let me now say a couple of words about one project that is of a high interest of Estonia, which is, of course, Rail Baltica, but not only Estonia. I believe that there are other countries very much interested, especially all the Baltic countries, Poland, and, of course, all the countries on a Baltic-Adriatic corridor. I'm really, really happy that Estonia has been very successful in making use of CEF by dedicating the totally of its CEF cohesion envelope, 191 million euros, to the implementation of Rail Baltica. I mean, it's kind of dangerous to put the label to a project like a project of a century, because then immediately you call all kinds of energies to this title. But it's true. Rail Baltica is a historical project, because for the first time this part of European Union will be connected fully to the single European transport area and to a single market through railway mode, which we know is the most decarbonized and the most efficient mode especially for cargo, but also for passengers market. So Rail Baltica will also diversify and secure the whole transport infrastructure and equalizing the east-west and north-south routes. But at the same time, we are very clear that all transport investment projects create jobs and can ensure growth not only of transport portfolio, but also of all other portfolios that are first related to logistics systems, but logistics is part of any business, as we know. I really welcome the readiness of the Baltic states to underpin the future development of this project with an intergovernment agreement, which was ratified by Estonian Parliament this summer. Only if the global Rail Baltica project is implemented on the basis of trust and in a joint manner through joint venture will it be a success of smooth and efficient implementation, and that's exactly what is happening. Before I conclude, let me just point out a couple of new things that are happening in the investment side. On the top of the regular CEF calls, I already mentioned before that 1 billion euros was used this year for the first time for the blending calls, with applications exceeding the budget foreseen. It is expected that this call will generate 1 billion, further 5 billion of direct investments in EU transport. Among the 68 proposals received and requesting 2.2 billion euros of grants, 70 are proposed to be implemented or partially implemented in the territory of at least one cohesion member state, and that includes Estonia. What does it mean, blending call? Blending call means that you can use the grants that you have and you use them to lower the risk factor of the strategic projects that otherwise would not be bankable or investable, and you bring then either loans or private or institutional investors on board with much lower risk factors because you used grants to leverage that. CEF is not the only instrument, of course, that supports the investments. There are many other structural funds and EFSI, for example. The 3 Baltic states are making a good use of EFSI, we have to say that, across a variety of transport modes. And I'm pleased that the authorities of Tallinn Airport have reached out to EFSI for financing the extension and modernization works of the airport. And I'm also well aware that Estonia sees only limited use of EFSI, but on the basis of current experience, I can tell you that EFSI can provide considerable advantage to the borrowers, especially if engagement is taken forward with the private non-state players. And for those who don't know what EFSI is, it's a new plan for investment from this Commission called also Juncker's Plan, where we recognize the need in order to boost strategically important projects in EU to come with a guarantee option and also with facilities for technical support and alignment of regulatory frameworks in order to encourage also private investors where their revenues are foreseen. So this is really working well, and only in these 3 years, this mechanism brought over 200 billion euros overall in all portfolios together of investments to EU, and that is quite a substantial amount. So we will continue, and I'm glad that the Parliament confirmed the second phase, so-called FC2, so we will continue with this kind of mechanisms also in the future. We also have a clean transport facility in place, and this facility draws on funding and financial resources to accelerate decarbonization in transport, notably in the area of alternative fuels. And this is yet another proof, because we recognized the need and generated this tool under this mandate and already deployed it. Last but not least, let me look at the future as well. The EU is investing heavily, but the needs are even bigger. We ask all member states to submit the amounts that they plan to need by 2030, and the total amount of needed investment in the core network is 500 billion euros. If we take on board also comprehensive networks, this amount already rises to 1.5 trillion euros. The numbers might look big, but considering that it's over 100 trillion euros undeployed money out there sitting on the bank accounts, I mean, we can be motivated and pull at least 1% or few percentage of that amount to transport and get it engaged. Of course, for that we need to raise the proper confidence, transparency and predictability of the regulatory framework that, of course, investors will dare to invest. And at the end, motivation for you as well. What can you expect if you support investments in transport? First, we know that investments expected, only investments in TEN-T are expected to generate over 4,500 billion of cumulated GDP and correspond to 13 million job year and a reduction of about 7 million tons of CO2 emissions between 2015 and 2030. But not only that. My last call goes towards the negative effects of transport, and I'm inviting you to join forces with the Commission and with the Council in order to bring them down. Every day, my dear colleagues, every day 70 people lose their lives on European roads. As we speak, people are dying on European roads. Over 350 are seriously injured every day. That results in over 25,000 fatalities and over 135,000 seriously injured. When we put this in a socio-economical cost, only for rehabilitation, we use over 100 billion euros per year. Let's improve our infrastructure. Let's bring the intelligence systems on board that we can really decrease that, because this is not only one shot, this is not only statistics. People who lose their dear ones in car accidents, they live for the entire life with this memory, and they will never be fully back as a creative force of our societies. The second one that you will pay attention to, I'm sure, is that transport is causing a lot of problems in the health area, either through the air pollution or through the noise pollution. The estimate shows that over 120 billion euros per year in EU is spent for health-related issues regarding these two causes. Let's bring this down. We can do it. We can do it with the smart investments. And last but not least, we lose in congestion €1 billion per day, working day. Imagine that. And if you put this together, only socioeconomical costs related to the way how we manage transport today already results on €500 billion per year. So let's decrease this. Let's move 20% of that and invest and really create the infrastructure that will support and make us happy, not to cause more troubles in the society. But I'm very optimistic. The way how we work together as an ecosystem, Parliament, Council, the Commission, and all stakeholders, it's really encouraging, and I hope that after today's session you will feel the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pultz, for this very interesting overview. Our next speaker will be Ms. Kadri Simpson. Dear Kadri, the floor is yours.
Honourable members of the Economic Affairs Committees, it is my utmost pleasure to see you all here in Tallinn. Welcome. Thank you, Chairman Sester, for hosting this event and for the introductory remarks. And thank you, Commissioner Violeta Bulc, for your thoughts in relation to the EU transport policies currently debated. Good transport connections between the member states promote economic growth and stimulate trade, create jobs, and increase the competitiveness. The movement of goods and people is the core of today's society and can only be happening if there is good connectivity and proper infrastructure in place. By looking at today's agenda, I see that there are numerous interesting and valuable discussions ahead. In this session, we discuss the European Union transport policy for connecting Europe. Let me start by saying a few words about the previous days. Violeta mentioned it in her speech already briefly, but we have held an informal meeting of the EU Ministers of Energy on Tuesday and Wednesday, and Ministers of Transport on Wednesday and Thursday here in Tallinn. And at this meeting, we discussed future financing solutions for strategic high added value energy and transport projects. We are also hosting a Connecting Europe conference at this very moment, which is discussing the same matters. It is hardly a secret that building roads and interconnections can be quite expensive. At the moment, in the EU, we are exchanging ideas how to shape the future investments policy for the trans-European networks beyond 2020. It is clear that we need large-scale investments to achieve the ambitious goal to complete the TEN-T core network by 2030 and the comprehensive network by 2050. I'm glad that at the meeting we just finished, we made good headway in this debate. We were able to build a strong case for a future-looking investments framework for the transport policy based on the TEN-T framework and its priorities. I consider the TEN-T network to be the backbone of the European single market. Proper infrastructure is important for our citizens and businesses.
So, something happened? I think it's just technical reason.
I wonder if it might be my wristwatch. Exactly. Excuse me. So I consider the TEN-T network to be the backbone of the European single market, as I already mentioned. And we are in the moment of time when the European Commission has initiated a debate on the future of Europe. Part of this debate covers also the discussion of the future of the EU finances. Thus, there is an imminent need for a structured debate on the future investments policy for the trans-European networks. This is also why we are debating this topic here today with you. And just for your information, if you will have coffee break and you are leaving this room, then when you are leaving the back entrance, there will be a table where you will find brochures delivering TEN-T which is very useful material, and it was provided to the ministers just yesterday. So as an additional material, I just grab one. It is crucial to ensure our support to the infrastructure projects that provide value to economic security and to the integration of the internal market. Strategic cross-border infrastructure projects connecting citizens and businesses have to remain an EU priority for investments. And it is clear that the investment needs remain considerable. The success of our efforts will rely on our ability to identify the needs, set priorities, and deliver the expected investment results on the ground. I would also briefly like to highlight topics that will be discussed here later during the day. At the next session, we will discuss the implementation of the EU aviation strategy with regards to connectivity within and for Europe. And your last session will focus on the sustainability and the innovative aspect of transport. When talking about connecting Europe, we cannot forget the question of innovation as the main driver to make transport more sustainable, quicker and safer, but also to connect. We all know that one of the most debated topics in the transport sector is currently the issue of connected and automated cars. But there are also work already ongoing on automated ships, as you will later hear. Transport sector is undergoing drastic changes. There is a belief that transportation is going to transition from ownership to transportation as a service, where peer-to-peer platforms and automated driving will play a key role. Therefore, I welcome all discussions that highlight the importance of the future technology and innovation in transport. Innovation will be the basis for the future European policy for transport. A last point from me in relation to the aviation strategy for Europe. Passenger transport in aviation sector has increased nearly by 50% during this century. But despite the rapid growth, the sector is facing a number of new challenges. It is important to strengthen competitiveness and sustainability throughout the EU aviation sector. The informal meeting of the transport ministers this week also focused on the question of guaranteeing sustainable and equal connectivity for all regions in Europe, also for the more peripheral ones. The aviation strategy is also foreseeing actions to ensure fair competition between the European airlines and the third country airlines. Also, these discussions are important when discussing about what EU transport policy can do to connect Europe. Member states with a small population and situated on the periphery of the European Union cannot rely on market forces to build a viable air connectivity to meet the needs of business and leisure traffic. By that, I will conclude my introductory remarks. Thank you, Chairman, for the floor to express my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Simpson. Now I'm delighted to give the floor to Ms. Karima Telli, who is the chair of a committee on transport and tourism of the European Parliament. Dear Karima, please take the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I need a box because I speak in French because I like united in diversity. When you talk about language, it's very important to have a diversity of language. Okay, that's right for you?
Please, yes.
Okay, great. Madame la Commissaire,
Madam Commissioner, dear Violetta, Minister, dear Kadri, ladies and gentlemen, Parliament members, I am extremely happy to be here today to speak with the colleagues from national parliaments. We all know that it is a very complicated task, but it's also a big challenge to chair a parliamentary committee. On the EU level, we have a historical tradition of making political compromises and reaching consensus. We are attempting to find always a majority that would be as wide as possible. I have to say that the job of the chairwoman of the TRAN Committee of the European Parliament, I have set myself a goal of sticking to this culture of compromise, because together we are smarter than on our own. There are topics where compromises are easier to reach or consensus is easier to reach, and there are others that are more difficult. And investments concerning European networks belong to the second category. It is difficult to find consensus here because if we develop European networks, then we are developing the European project as such. We as Europeans need to say that we have to invest in infrastructure in any region, be it for cohesion purposes, be it in the format of renovating the existing networks, or in the format of modernizing our current networks so that they would be adapted to the challenges that face us, the climate challenge, public health challenges, etc. And I am extremely happy to see that there are countries who have also chosen this as a priority and launched their national programs. 2 days ago, I was in France to see the launch of their national mobility project. This means that we have a national mobility scheme which is well connected, sustainable, well financed, and directed at the future. And there is another factor that we cannot forget. The new forms of mobility have to work in favor of our citizens. We are the representatives of European citizens, and anything we do has to be to serve them. And if we look at our territories then and speak about mobility, then we can see a too big connectivity gap between different territories. We need to make sure that in our policies we leave nobody behind on the roadside, not in a case where somebody lives in a remote area, not in a case when ticket prices seem too high for our citizens. I am a firm believer in pedagogy. We cannot just set up new infrastructures if we do not interconnect them. We need to change behavior patterns of our citizens, and I understand our mission to be the following. We as representatives of European citizens need to make them love European transport networks, because mobility is one of the main symbols of Europe, and it is also something through which we can meet our neighbors. European transport network policy that was debated yesterday by ministers has to have firm objectives: renovation, modernization, adaptation to social and climate challenges, digitalization. And one of the most important objectives is to simplify the coordination of how those objectives are fulfilled on different levels: the EU level, national level, local level. When the European Parliament and the Council adopted the TEN-T regulation in 2013, it had a clear structure. We had the core network and the global network. We are We have currently 9 core corridors that are connecting the north with the southeast, with the west. In addition, we have the motorways of the seas and the ERTMS, European Rail Transport Management System. The Transport Committee at the European Parliament will keep a firm eye on the development of those corridors. We have regular meetings with the European corridor coordinators. And when we exchange best practice, then we can see that best practices emerge when member states can overcome the obstacles to coordination and find proper cross-border solutions. And when it comes to the CEF, then it is a mechanism with a clear European added value and the objective of increasing European connectivity as well as developing clean transport. We have achieved a lot since 2013, especially in the fields of procurement and creation of TEN-T networks. However, there are some criticisms to be voiced at the member states. Their dimensioning and also the investments as well as the financing programs or their transparency, which the programs are submitted to the European Commission. However, the Parliament and through this the citizens do not have the right of scrutiny concerning the financing programs. So I would call upon all of us to carry out this scrutiny function. National parliaments need to have in mind scrutiny of projects, particularly on the budget side. We have a number of projects that have proven to be too expensive, and in hindsight, the projects have also proven to be related to infrastructure that is not used enough. So keeping all this in mind, we need to keep the dynamics of moving along. We need to finalize the core network by 2013 and also prepare ourselves for the next programming period. What do we need in terms of resources for the next programming period? CEF has indicated that the need for grants is much higher than the resources that we have at this moment. This concerns particularly cohesion countries, and TEN-T could move along much faster if we could find additional resources. One of the ways of finding additional resources is introducing more innovating financing packages, also better taxation of infrastructure use and use of more polluting transport modes. In addition to finalizing the core network, we also need to finalize the global network or the comprehensive network by 2050. And I believe that the cohesion fund here has a very important role to play to provide the missing links between regions. Now, when it comes to the next multi-annual financial framework, then the European Parliament needs to give its consent to the final budget. We are working on it already right now, and I can assure you that our Commission will be actively contributing to formulating the Parliament's position. We talked about blending. EFSI, or the Juncker plan, is using only 10% of its assets for transport. During the next programming period, we want more. This is not enough. And it is also clear that blending is the first step in creating the new financial framework, but we cannot use it as pretext to cut the overall financing for transport networks. You probably know that we are also in the middle of recasting the mobility package, or more specifically, the Eurovignette directive. We are thankful for the Commissioner for the proposal. We hope that we can adopt these changes soon. And finally, I would like to touch upon a few points that are not related to financing, but are more general. Dear colleagues, I am sure that we need to think about the sustainable and digital aspect of transport across all transport modes. This will also help us to decarbonize our transport system and implement the COP21 Paris Agreement. Transport needs to be less damaging for the health of our citizens and damage the environment less as well. Infrastructures need to be adapted to new multimodal logistics, alternative fuels, gas or other energy sources. And we are actually undergoing a mobility revolution. When we are talking about the years 2030 or 2050, then by that time we will see huge changes. The revolution is ongoing on all levels. You have probably witnessed this on national level. We're talking about ride sharing, or carpooling. We're talking about autonomous vehicles or semi-autonomous vehicles. We're talking about new freight transport modes. We have drone transport, smart mobility, intelligent transport systems. I will not list all the possibilities here, but as you can see, we are living revolutionary times right now. And it is my wish that digitalization would be a success story for Europe, so that we could move towards a more sustainable mobility system. It will also help us create decent jobs. But it will also help us to retain European talent, because it is sometimes difficult to make the pioneers in these fields visible, and we need to do this. We need to make them visible. I am impatiently looking forward to your positions on TEN-T and CEF. I know that Rail Baltic is a very important topic in this region. Intergovernmental agreements will reach your parliament within the coming months. But I, as the chair of the EU Parliament TRAN Committee, can tell you that my door is always open to you. It is high time for us to meet more regularly than we have so far, to talk to each other, because if we're talking about the European project in the field of transport, then it needs to become concrete and understandable for our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lim. So, as I see, we have already 11 parliamentarians who wants to ask. Feel free to push a head button. We have possibility to ask questions today from European Parliament level, European Commission level, and of course from Estonian government represented by Minister of Economical Affairs and Infrastructure. Colleagues, let's go to a panel discussion. We have Henrik Holole here who moderating this, and I will give the floor to you. Henrik, what do you think about these overviews, and give us your short overview and take the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And of course, it's my. I just have to come down because I have to see.
Yeah.
It's my great pleasure to moderate the three distinguished speakers who just shared big passion towards the infrastructure policy in Europe, and also we heard very interesting views.
I hope that this microphone will work. Yes, is it working? All right.
It is not working. It is not working. Not working. Just speak into the microphone, maybe, into the main microphone. It's not working. Not working.
This one? Yes. I can do whatever. Okay.
You know, Estonia is a digital world, so please.
It's always, you know, with the microphones.
Yes.
So, I think what we heard also is that connecting Europe is not an opportunity, it's a must. And what's very important, and which was also emphasized, is that connecting Europe is a positive European agenda for people and for businesses. So what are the main elements for the Connecting Europe policy? I think first and foremost, for every European project, and the Europeans are very, very demanding on that, first and foremost, safety always comes first. I think today one can say security is equally important. But the infrastructure policy, taking these things into account very clearly, is also concentrating on delivering the highest European value added. That is what the Connecting Europe is about. And it's also about concentrating on the missing links, concentrating on the bottlenecks, and also trying to bring Europe better together in a more coherent manner. If we look at the map, we actually see that there are a lot of connections which are not there between the eastern part of the European Union and the western part. And it's also very important that we would have as smooth connections as possible, as many options as possible. European infrastructure policy is about decarbonization. It's not an opportunity, it's an obligation. Transport is going to grow. And if our policy is not delivering decarbonization, then it really poses the question, can transport grow? No. Decarbonization has to go hand in hand in creating new infrastructure. We have to clearly support the more sustainable transport modes like railways, inland waterways, and also create the conditions for the deployment of alternative fuels. Digitalization. This is about the future. The European transport policy, the Connecting Europe, has to be smart. It has to be able to look into the future, and that is also what has to be part of that infrastructure policy. And what we have today at the European level, we have the trans-European networks, we have the coordinators, distinguished former politicians who are running the coordination on a transport network corridor. We have the Connecting Europe facility and other financial facilities. There is a lot we have in place, but we, at the same time, as you heard from the speakers as well, we have an investment need to the core network of 750 billion for 2030. It is a lot of money. It is a lot of challenge. And we also, what we heard today from the three speakers was fully endorsed by the Ministers of Transport and the Ministers of Energy, who were discussing the same issues earlier this week. So, before I give the floor to you to the questions, I have also one question I would like each of the speakers to ask, to reply. And just very shortly, but against all this background, why is it that there is a feeling that transport/connectivity related investments are not always sufficiently prioritized at the highest political level? Or is that not the case? So maybe if we can start from Karima, could you be first?
It is working.
Est-ce qu'on a l'impression que... Ah, une pêche. Est-ce que nous avons l'impression que la question des investissements n'est pas une question prioritaire dans les questions?
Not working. Not working.
Phone, please.
So we have some problems. You are ready? So
It is not working. Not a word.
Now it's okay?
It's okay?
Now we can hear.
Phone is working. Okay. So, quick answer to questions. So we have had the impression that if you look at the investments, then the field of transportation does not seem to be a priority. Then yes, indeed, we can see that. If, as you heard, I alluded to the Juncker plan and to the FC. That dedicates only 10% to the field of transportation. So that does not meet their requirements. So from the point of view of the investments, they should be the investments which should really support the transportation policy across Europe. So therefore, all these new financing schemes and facilities, I believe that Violetta agrees with me, then in the new Juncker plan, the transportation needs better support. So if we look at the member states and all the countries who are implementing the projects, then it all has to be easier for them, because often it is just all too complicated. Then yes, I do agree. Right now, it does not quite meet our requirements, and therefore the European Parliament and also the European Commission do share the same objectives. And we hope that the transport is going to be, by the next period, a priority.
Thank you, Henrik, for a very interesting question. Well, from the presidency side, I am chairing both councils of Council of Energy Ministers and Council of Transport Ministers. And if I have to compare, then yes, maybe in the Energy Minister's side, it is easier to get very large investments, because somehow it is visible that if there is a threat for blackout, then the results are more severe than the result that if there is a not very well working connection. But at the same time, I do know that in every member country there are very motivated ministers who are eager to fight for their sector. And that's what we just agreed yesterday with transport ministers. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind that finally, the 2020 and after EU budget will be agreed on finance ministers' level. So if I may ask you all too, so please express your support to the next programming period for the infrastructure investments too, because it has to be agreed in a higher political level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Well, coming from the outside as a politician, I've been in this position only for 3 years. I would argue that one of the reasons is probably that it takes a long time to prepare transport projects. It takes a long time to deploy transport projects, and it, by all means, lasts longer than 4 years. So hardly any politician really dares to risk the political agenda and puts the jockey on transport projects, because somebody else will take the fame. Which is a lack of political, of course, maturity, because we're not here to serve our 4-year cycle. We're here to serve people and businesses that we represent. But I think this is slightly changing, especially because of European agenda. European agenda goes beyond 4-year cycles on a local level. 10T goes beyond. Planning of 10T, we are thinking about 20, 30 years' time. And I think this is now slowly coming down on a local level as well. I would be very politically incorrect now, and I would also argue that one of the reasons in the past was that there was too many engineers in the position of ministers. I'm an engineer. But at the same time, not enough women. And there was not the right dynamic in the discussion. I think this is changing. You can see it here. and we will promote women in transport even stronger, because through a really dynamic dialogue that we bring with a different way of understanding the social challenges and the opportunities, I think there are good times ahead of it for transport, and of course I count on you, that you will be a very strong voice on the local level for us as well.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And now we have about 40 minutes or so, and we can turn to the questions from you. And I see that there is already a nice list drawing up. So I will start from those who are the first ones to push the button.
Henrik, and before you continue, I just want to admit that we're all politicians, I know, and we're allowing to speak, of course. We're professionals. I will make time limit for 2 minutes to ask questions, and I will take this, and will be quite strongly looking. Otherwise, it's quite difficult to manage it. So, Henrik, once more, take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You made my life as a moderator much easier. So we will start from Mr. Delgado Arce. Please.
So I wanted to congratulate Estonian Parliament for organizing this conference or for being so kind to us today. I want to salute Mrs. Violeta Bock. After, in the month of March, we met in Madrid when she visited our Congress. And I would like, on behalf of the Spanish delegation, to transmit and convey a serious messages. First, we fully share that transport and energy are two basic pillars of the policy of the EU because they contribute to the single market and to an environmental and socio-economic agreement because it decarbonizes economy. Therefore, we do believe that it is very important to ensure that both sectors have for the following framework an economic support in accordance to their impact. The seat that was approved in 2013 has been a successful tool. We confirm that. But we want for CEF2 to allow to have more resources to finish the basic network for 2030. That CEF has provided corridors for the Trans-European Network or transport, and we do believe that these corridors have been very interesting. This model has been very good with its governance, with the coordinator, and we ask for to have a review in 2018 taking into account the proposals of the different states. I would also like to say that the objective is to carry out the basic network fully, not only the corridors, but to have the full network. So we have to make sure that CF2 will allow to have a fund redistribution with a higher weight in order to achieve the objectives. I fully share what Mrs. Deli says. We think that subsidies have to be a key and necessary piece in the scheme of execution of the network. That's why CF2 will have to take this into account and increase the budget for meeting the objective of finalizing the network by 2030. So simply, I would like to say that we fully share the strategy of the decarbonization, and we do believe that it is very important to have an infrastructure related to the market of alternative fuels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that this was more of a statement of support rather than a question. So I will take the next who has pushed the button, Mr. Filippi from Italy.
Italy fully supports the European Union's transport infrastructure policy, and the program is ambitious, and the goals are in line for a new season in the European Union. This European vision was supported by Italy with its own planning, with multi-year planning. We have selected priorities. We have made we have put in place the projects, and we have allocated resources. Our planning is not completely in line with the Trans-European network, and we've been able in Italy to identify some challenges that require being reviewed. But these challenges will reflect in a new planning by the European Union. On the one hand, we need to bring the financial framework in line with the available resources, which is not enough to achieve the goals in the time set. And for our countries, it has been estimated that from here to 2030, we should spend 76 billion euro, of which 43 billion only for the central network. And the EU contribution is equal to 14 billion, that is to say 60% of the present available funds, and offering a coverage for Italy of only 20% of investments. But on the other hand, we need also to reflect on the EU strategy, depending on the economic dynamics that other international powers are advancing, like the new Silk Way and infrastructural shopping in Eurasia. In this strategy, we are helpless spectators, and the European Union should prepare an adequate and corresponding response. And it would be important to listen from Violeta Bulc and the chairperson of the Parliamentary Committee of the European Parliament in this respect. Thank you.
Very much. I think there was maybe a moment for a short comment. No.
Well, the only thing I can add is that, yes, we will be, after 2020, starting a new process of planning. And, of course, we will be going back to member states and see which further commitments can be made in a spirit of TEN-T network, so 9 corridors, which probably will be then expanded as well.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Let's move on. The next speaker is Mr. Prokopiu from, it's Mr. Kepli from Hungary. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank Commissioner Violeta Bulc for her visit to the Hungarian National Assembly this Tuesday on the 19th of September. The visit gave an opportunity to have an open and valuable discussion among the Commissioner and the members of the committees on economics and European affairs on the Hungarian National Assembly on the elements of the mobility package. Hungary currently holds the presidency of the Visegrad Group from July 2017 to June 2018. Transport policy and infrastructure is a key priority of the Hungarian presidency. The permeability of borders and cross-border mobility within the EU are important European values as well as economic necessities. In the field of transport, the main priorities of the Hungarian V4 presidency are the strengthening of the major transport connections, both east-west and north-south. We consider the Three Seas initiative, which has launched in 2016 as a possible channel of political cooperation between the Visegrad countries, the Adriatic and the Baltic regions. By simultaneously developing the main transport corridors in the region and by eliminating bottlenecks and other technical and legislative obstacles, we are determined to give better connectivity and accessibility to the Central European region. This would foster not only economic growth, but social improvement as well. If we want economic integration to go further in the EU, we should re-establish the functional linkage between Central Eastern Europe's macro regions as well. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this important statement, and let's move on to the next speaker. And the next speaker is Mr. Prokopiu from Cyprus.
Honorable Commissioner, dear colleagues, in the context of this deliberation, I would like to particularly refer to Turkey, who still refused to implement the Ankara Protocol, demanding that Ankara open its ports and airport to vessels and aircraft carrying the Cypriot flag. Turkey has still not fulfilled its obligation to ensure full and non-discriminatory implementation of the official protocol. Although the European Commission condemns the continuing illegal shipping and aviation embargo imposed by Turkey on vessels under the Cyprus flag and on Cypriot civil aircraft respectively, and calls on Turkey to terminate this embargo immediately. So far, it has not taken any sanction against Turkey, which still has its candidate status for joining the EU. Moreover, based on a purely economic rationale, the European Commission envisages upgrading EU-Turkey customs union. I call on European institutions as well as on EU partners to demonstrate their solidarity towards Cyprus in real terms. EU must exert commensurate pressure and influence on Turkey in order to lift its embargo on Cyprus visa reports. In case of non-compliance, sanctions should be imposed. It is of utmost importance for the EU to safeguard its core founding principles and values. If Turkey aspires to maintain its status of an EU candidate country, it has to comply with the Union's rules and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for presenting the Cyprus position, which is also very well known to us. And I will now move on to give the floor to Mr. Zonka from Poland.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Polish delegation, I would like to express my gratitude for your hospitable welcome, especially for the dinner and the last drink we received. It was excellent. We fully support the policy of the European Union. We cannot be indifferent to the fact that 20,000 people per annum lose their lives in traffic accidents. We also have to take into account the damages paid out to their families. We experience the same problem in Poland. From 6,000, we reduced this number to 3,000. This is great progress. Still, it remains a problem. We fully agree with the mitigation of CO2 emissions. This is fully in line with our strategy. I would like to request that Madam Commissioner express her views on Via Carpathia. In October 2016, the Deputy MEP Poręba initiated a debate on Via Carpathia. This initiative links 7 states from Thessaloniki in Greece to Klaipėda in Latvia and passes through European states. I would like to request your opinion on what the chances are for strengthening this project. Of course, we need to strengthen the core network. I am aware of that. But what are your views on Via Carpathia? This project requires strengthening. Turkey is interested in this, Ukraine, Belarus as well. Experts take a great interest in this project. We request support for this project. Madam Commissioner, we know what your capacity is, and we would like to request that the European Parliament support a resolution on Via Carpathia. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this meeting. Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner, for participating in this meeting. Thank you so much.
For statement and also for your question and also for explaining the Polish achievements in the area of road safety as well as the mitigation of CO2. But now I turn to the Commissioner on the issue of Via Carpathia, please.
Thank you very much for this question, and I will try to answer to it in the spirit of Hungarian comment as well. First of all, the TEN-T core corridors were agreed and signed 2014, and at that time was also agreed on not reopen the planning until the end of the period. So we will not be changing any kind of core corridors agreements within this period. As I mentioned before, we will be looking at new possibilities of extension of the core network after 2020. So at that time, Poland is more than welcome to come on board with all other member states in order to propose the new corridor. But that doesn't mean that you don't have other means to co-finance this track, or it's a road, I believe, right? And there are 2 different options that you have. First of all, you can use, and all member states can use cohesion money in order to implement this connection, but you also can use blending money. So you could come up with your own financial tool in order to start the initial work. We know that this doesn't happen overnight. So instead of waiting until you agree on the corridor with EU, why don't you start the first work and commit your available financial means, and then of course we will pick it up from there during the negotiations. So please don't stop, because I know how important the Via Carpathia is for all the countries that you mentioned. So blending innovative financial mechanisms that are there can support you in the first phases. But that also encourages all countries that are on our East and Central European border. We are really working well now with Eastern Partnership countries. We agreed on all the maps, on cross-border connectivity. We are now co-financing the first projects. And I think these countries, which I met yesterday, all the ministers, they are very eager to improve their connectivity as well. So I'm sure that the next planning period will be a very dynamic one also in this direction, because it's a way towards China. And you know that we are working now very closely with Chinese authorities on a connectivity level between, on a connectivity projects between Asia and EU, and I'm glad that in spring, when I met with the president of NDRC, that we agreed that this will be now a corridor logic, no longer point-to-point connectivity between China and Europe, but it's going to be a corridor, which means we will start engaging all countries along the corridor as well.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Let's move on. The next speaker is Mr. Kivimägi from Estonia. Toomas, ole hea.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, honorable speakers, dear colleagues. My remarks and very easy question is to Commissioner. First of all, I'd like to thank you so much mentioning even more, pointing out the importance of Rail Baltic. That's really a historic project, not only for Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, but for the whole of Europe. And you mentioned that benefited countries will be Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland. But I'd like to add also Finland to this list, because if we are talking about the freight, so that Finland is really one of the key players in this project as well. And I'm very sure that all Europe benefits from this project. But there's one only concern about this project, so that what will be the co-funding rate on the next financial period? That's the only concern, I would say, if we are talking about this Rail Baltic, and I try to help you to answer to this question, so that, in my opinion, it's not fair to change the rules during the game. I mean that if we started this project and we agreed with financing, also co-financing by EU, so that my personal opinion is that we should continue with the same co-financing rate after 2020. And as I know that there's no official position by EU, that's why I ask, what's your personal opinion about that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And Commissioner, great question, isn't it?
Personal opinions in this house, in the spirit of Rail Baltica, don't matter. No, thank you for the question. I think it's a very valid one. And of course, we don't have a crystal ball and to be able to predict what's going to be beyond 2020. But you know that Commission is not the one who makes all the decisions. We are co-deciding with the Parliament, with the Council, and I think it's going to be really important that you're very much present, that you send very strong messages from member states, from parliaments, from the governments, and we will be co-deciding on the future structure of CEF. So, of course, from the point of view of a single European transport area, and especially European Transport Union, we would like to have the core networks as quickly completed as possible, and all Baltic region, including Finland, as you rightly pointed out, connected to the European market as efficiently as possible. So it's not like black and white. Let's work stronger and strong together to really justify that. EU has very clear rules on, at this point, what we want to achieve in transport. Cross-border connectivity, because without EU this would not happen. Let's be frank. So that's why Rail Baltica is also very symbolic projects for EU. We want to complete all the missing links. and of course push for decarbonization and digitalization, where rail plays an important role. So be also bold and make sure that you implement really modern solutions. Yeah, digitalization, ERTMS, and all this that I know that it's planned. So it's up to us together. And I know if we have a good cooperation, we will make it.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I will move on to the next speaker, Mr. Ilikali from Turkey, please.
Teşekkür ederim. Türkiye Büyük Millet Meclisi.
I'm thanking to you, and it's really a good occasion for me to be here. When we speak about that, it's not possible to to create relations without Turkey. It's and when we speak about that China is important for the European Union, and then it's also important for us. But when the delegation from Cyprus speaks something very different, then I'm really against that. And what I'm saying, I'm not saying as a parliament member, but as a person who for 35 years was conducting transportation policies. In Europe, of course, many people are dying in traffic accidents, and a lot of money has been spent on health problems. And what we can do as a candidate for European member countries is a cooperation on this level, and then what our practices which we made in the sphere of health and prevention of accidents, and we have a project that we submitted to our Prime Minister, and we believe that we can act not only on our national level but also on the international level. But what I want to say that is our country is really helpful and really important for the whole European Union.
Statement. I think that it is, looking at the map, it is also crystal clear how important the location is, and of course the EU wants to work well with all its neighbors. Let's go to the next statement. Mr. Kowakowski from Poland, please.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. We should ask ourselves today about how rail passenger transport would look like in 15-20 years. Let us create 500+ high-speed train networks. Such high-speed passenger rail connections would ensure connections between Poland, East, South and West of Europe. Since Estonia is holding the presidency of the EU, I would like to turn to Commissioner Violeta Bulc, an important infrastructure project, an axis north-south connecting Europe by high-speed rail. I would like to encourage you to examine the project of building a high-speed rail that would connect Helsinki through the Baltic Sea to Tallinn, Baltic states, Warsaw, V4 states, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey. We would welcome building a high-speed rail that connects north and south. This connection is vital for the development of the EU, especially of its eastern areas. Ladies and gentlemen, what technology should we apply? Maybe we should open a competition for designing this network. We're living in times of change. Within a dozen or a year or so, we may stop using fossil fuels. New materials and new technologies will allow rails to be even more safe and even faster. We're aiming at 500 at rails that go at 500 kilometers or more. In order to ensure social and economic benefits, we should build short and direct connections between Europe capitals. So I would like to ask Ma'am Commissioner and the Estonian presidency and to the EU to examine that proposal. And I would like to congratulate you on organizing such a wonderful conference.
For your statement and for your question, I think that half of the question is already been answered also in the form of the Rail Baltica project, which is the high-speed train from Helsinki to Warsaw. But further on, Commissioner and maybe Kadri, Minister, would also like to say a couple of words, but if I may ask you to be short because we are a bit running out of time.
Well, I picked up your suggestion that we should see the trajectory from Finland until the Turkey. And well, from our side, we sincerely are planning our Rail Baltic not as a final stop here close to the Tallinn called Port Muuga, but we are strongly pushing forward towards Finland. At first, we are planning cooperation between two ports, Muuga and Vuosaari, but there are research under there is ongoing research if it's possible to build sub-sea tunnel between Tallinn and Helsinki. It would help to fasten the connection significantly. So I do agree that fast connection is very vital for our region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Commissioner, you want to say something?
Please submit the proposal. We want to see commitment of all the member states that you're talking about, and let's talk.
Thank you very much, Karima.
Moi, je suis pour qu'on aille relier le nord.
Well, I'm in the favor of north and south connection, but you are saying that we need to move forward fast. And 500 kilometers per hour should be the speed. But we really need to pay close attention here because when we think about the train of the future, we tend to think about the hyperloop. So where you're actually basically moving on with the speed of light. But the problem currently is that none of the security issues have been solved yet. So, and with a hyperloop, you might get a problem that you can't get out of it, for example. But in the 21st century, it's not the absolute speed what is important. Why do I talk about it? Because the 21st century is where we talk about the nearness. If we talk about high-speed lines, connection lines, then along the route, there are small cities which need their own small railway station and the regional trains. So these are the ones which need modernization as well. So we have to pay attention. The 21st century is very quick with all the technological advancements, but at the same time, we are not obliged to say that, yes, indeed, we have the technology and we have to adapt it and implement it, but we should not forget everything else. That means we have to update what we have right now, and we have to work so that everybody has access to mobility.
Very much. Now I just want to say that we have quite pressed time. I have still got 6 speakers. If you are all mindful of time, then I would try to take you all and also short answers, and then I close the list now, so no point of pushing any more buttons. Next one is Mr. Kolovratnik from Czech Republic.
Okay, hello. I'm a member of Czech Parliament, and we are representatives of both chambers of Czech Parliament here. I would like to thank very much European Union, Mrs. Commissioner, and also Estonia colleagues to organize such a great meeting. It's really challenging for me. And to my topic, we are not organized with colleagues from Poland, but I also would like to speak about high-speed trains because it's my big personal topic. And I would like to say that I was the initiator or author of revolutionary parliament resolution, which Czech Parliament successfully voted this March. And we gave many tasks to Czech government. We told that we want to start building of high-speed trains immediately. Don't hesitate, but start immediately. And the things are really changing in the Czech Republic. So I'm happy, and I am optimistic in that case. But the question is, maybe to you, Mrs. Violeta Bulc, maybe to colleagues from Italy or Spain, how to promote these high-speed trains in Czech Republic. Because, you know, we have opposites, we have citizens which are telling, which have this problem, not in my backyard, it's good, but not in my backyard. We are too small country for high-speed train. Why should Czech people travel fast to Germany, Italy, and the other countries if they don't have good connection to their neighborhood village and so on? So when I'm listening to your ideas about one single market, one single transport area in Europe, it's great, and I will tell them. But please help me or give me some advice about marketing and promoting of high-speed trains. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Really quickly, I mean, it's never black and white. And we have, with high-speed trains, very different experiences throughout the EU. In Spain, where they're the second largest state in the world covered by high-speed trains, they really put a lot of investments, but somehow it's not generating the right revenues yet. So it's really, you need to really base on the traffic loads and the real commitments that you see where you're going to generate the revenues from. Otherwise, this could be a serious challenge. The other one is, for example, in France. In France, they used railway as a really powerful tool to decrease also aviation needs, and they are now step by step deploying the high speeds where the largest congestions are. We see Germany that they decided that they are so densely populated on the main routes that the speed to 220 is enough for them because they don't have enough distance in order to stop and again start. So it's a really different approaches throughout Europe. What I would like to see on a long run, and this is sort of a bold vision of EU, that every point-to-point connection between the major cities below to 500 kilometers is made by high-speed trains. But this is a long-term vision. I think I shared the emotions with Karima when she said that we need to ensure connectivity for all as well. So on any kind of these high investments, the business case has to speak. And we need to really take care of rural areas as well, that we don't completely isolate them. So there will be investments will have to be spread. But really take a look at the traffic. Traffic should be the motivator to decide which routes first, on which routes to move on first. And that applies to pretty much all this kind of investment that are deploying high-level technology. Because, as I said, we need to make sure that we don't create isolated areas in EU.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Let's move on. Mr. O'Mahony from Ireland, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the speakers and for hosting this important debate during your presidency. Connectivity is something that everybody in the rooms thinks is important. It's more important for countries that live on the periphery, on the edge of Europe, like Estonia, like Ireland. We are an island nation, and that is further complicated now, obviously, by our nearest neighbour, biggest trading partner, the UK, who actually govern 6 counties, part of our country. I'd just like to ask the Commissioner what flexibility is within the connectivity and the TNT, which you stated was signed off on in 2014, and can it be changed until 2020, or can it be looked at again until 2020? But the UK are due to leave in 2019, and obviously, depending on the negotiations, it is important that there is flexibility in connectivity, because connectivity will mean a different thing to Ireland when the UK have left. And I'd just like to ask the Commissioner that question.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'm going to take a couple of more statements and then I will ask them to reply so that we can a bit maybe win in time. So the next speaker is Mr. Jalonen. Ole hyvä.
Thank you. It's nice to be here in our lovely neighbor country. First, there's Rail Baltic. Of course, my opinion is that it should not stop to the Tallinn. It should go to the north, to the sea, to the growing Asia market, and Europe needs Tallinn-Helsinki tunnel. That's my opinion. And the fast train, there might be new techniques like Hyperloop, what might be even safely than these days techniques, because it's going on a pipe. There's no crossing roads and no crossing others, then so it might be faster and safer. But anyway, in Finland we have laws what's maybe in the most modern in the whole world. It can open the market to the robot cars, autonomous cars, and drones and that kind of things, new techniques. Are you thinking the same way that in whole Europe should be this kind of laws what open the market to the new techniques?
Thank you very much. And I will take one more statement and then I will ask the panel to respond. So the next speaker is Mrs. Miljadinovic.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. Mr. Chair, madams, dear colleagues, the Republic of Serbia is strategically positioned and represents a key transport node for connecting with the EU and within the Balkan region. In accordance with this, we have taken very concrete steps in development of projects of national or regional significance with a focus of intensifying interconnection both on transport and energy terms. So we are working very hard to achieve EU standards in terms of regulation related to the transport policy and transport European networks through the implementation and concrete projects. Serbia is committed to development of good neighborhood relationships, which we deem an important precondition for interconnection and implementation of all projects. In line with this, I would like to mention the meeting of our prime ministers of the countries of the region that was held in Trieste in July this year, where the Transport Community Treaty was signed, thus giving the regional connectivity a formal legal character. The Transport Community Treaty is a great opportunity for all signatory countries and possibility to improve investments in the transport infrastructure and make a single market, but also bring traffic safety to the higher level. Because of the time, I just want to thank you for inviting Serbia, and also I hope that we will have more opportunities to speak about our regional projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I will ask first Commissioner to respond. I also know how committed she has been to see the signature of the Transport Community Treaty, so I know that she wants to reply to that very much, and I'm sure that you can take the Brexit question as well, and as from our Finnish colleague, maybe Kadri could also comment, or Karima. Please.
Very quickly, the time is really short now. For Ireland, we're very much aware of the challenges. It's basically daily on our table, but as you know, we are speaking with one voice as far as negotiations is concerned through our colleague Barnier, but really, we are part of his team. So yes, we are acknowledging extraordinary circumstances, and extraordinary circumstances need extraordinary decisions. But I will be in a couple of days in Ireland, an official visit, also in the Parliament, so I hope we can continue this discussion. But let me now quickly switch to the comments from my Swedish colleague. EU is very much dedicated to new trends. As you can see in digitalization, we are moving very swiftly, and we are determined to keep the global lead in this area. That's why we're moving fast on autonomous driving, connected cooperative vehicles. It's part of our mainstream strategy now. We are establishing already now platforms. The first member states are creating testing beds. Germany, France, and Luxembourg announced it officially. There are another one getting ready, Hungary, Slovenia, and Austria, and then also Netherlands, Germany, Germany, Belgium, and probably France will join that one as well. We have now on the EU level, this year we will create a platform within which these experiences will be exchanged, and we will, as regulators, move in a parallel to create proper regulatory frameworks for that. As far as the drones and remotely piloted aircrafts is concerned, at the end of the year, the new IASA regulation framework will come out, where drones will be, for the first time, individually addressed on an EU level. So we will have a regulatory framework for drones on EU. But not only that, in a couple of weeks we have, in November, we will have a very important drone conference in Finland, where we will reveal also the next step in the creation of so-called urban aviation space that will create legal certainty also, and especially the also technical solutions for inclusion of drones and any kind of flying vehicles into urban mobility systems. So I think we are very much on track, but we try to stay technology neutral. In a sense, like you mentioned, Hyperloop, that's a technology for us, so we don't know what's going to emerge out there, but we're open. I mean, we are looking at it. The Netherlands is already initiating a special group which will take a look, how should we treat this kind of technical solutions? Is this part of the aviation because of high speeds, or is it part of the railway because of the technology?
Well, Violetta already gave a very, very good answer to our Finnish colleague. Just a very short remark. Well, during our presidency here in Tallinn, well, we have used the automated bus to transport our delegates to the venue, from the hotel to the venue. And well, it was possible to use it in the framework of our current legislation, and it hasn't brought any kind of mess to the traffic. So I do see that there is a clear future for this kind of automated transport. Thank you.
Yeah, Mrs. Telly.
Très rapidement.
I'll be very brief. Autonomous vehicles, drones, currently are not legally regulated on the EU level. However, there are large liability-related issues here. If there is an accident that happens, who is liable? The technology owner, the builder of the vehicle, software engineer, the municipality. None of them can have sole liability. And if we do not initiate open data discussions in time, then we will also have issues in this field. Privacy is an important question for Europeans. We have analyzed the experience with autonomous vehicles already. Several member states have tested them. However, the situation is not the same in different countries. We can allow only those vehicles on our roads that are commonly acceptable. Currently, we have no infrastructure, no roads that would enable the use of autonomous vehicles. So we need the infrastructure first. You mentioned autonomous vehicles, but you did not mention the topic that is actually making European citizens worry right now. What do we do with the cars that are currently driving on our roads, but which are not in compliance with EU technical regulations? We have 30 million cars like that driving on European roads right now. We, as EP members, need to think about this issue. And we as European parliaments need to think about this issue, because it's an issue in the fields of energy, it's an issue in the field of transport. We are heading towards usage of gas, hydrogen, alternative fuels. The Finnish colleague mentioned drones, but before we move on to Hyperloop or drones, let us look at what our European colleagues are concretely putting in place right now. Alstom is presenting hydrogen-based trains, which are a win-win solution for us as transport organizers. People are currently turning their backs on trains because air flights are seemingly becoming less expensive than trains. So this is an issue we need to deal with this. Another issue that Violeta touched upon. Violeta said that it's a priority for her and a priority for us. It's road safety. We went to Malta during Malta's presidency. All the ministers signed a declaration on road safety. 26,000 people die on European roads every year, and I'm not even talking about the injuries. We have 7 injured people per each fatality. So I think that traffic safety is something that you as national parliaments need to make a priority in your legislative work. In European Parliament, we are discussing the issue of speed. We cannot decrease the number of fatalities if we cannot decrease traffic speed. Many of the accidents take place in urban spaces. Many of them are also linked to dangerous behavior. This means that we have a mission of training and educating people since their childhood through to adolescence.
We will take the 2 last statements as well, and then very short replies, and then the coffee is waiting for you. So next one, Mr. Kutajar from Malta, please.
Good morning, Mr. President, Madam Commissioner, distinguished speakers, dear friends. Please allow me to touch ground on another way of transportation, the use of bicycles. 2 direct questions, Madam Commissioner. First of all, I would like to ask what are the initiatives the European Union is taking regarding the use of bicycles. I believe also that the use of bicycles play an important role to reduce emissions in our municipalities. So I would like also to ask what are your intentions for the involvement of local government within the European Union in all this to achieve our main goals.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being brief. And then the last statement, Mr. Perea, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur le Président, chers commissaires et chers collègues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, colleagues. I have 2 short questions. The first one was actually implied by other speakers as well. The transport sector is undergoing fast changes. I would actually like to add a few factors that we have not mentioned yet. Short distances, we are trying to purchase products locally and sell them locally. And the second question has to do with our 3D space, how to manage traffic flows in our 3D space in the future when things are changing so far. Another question has to do with urban planning. TNT was initially a core infrastructure project that was intended for the next generation. But is the current TNT actually coherent with how we see the future of transport right now? And this is a debate that needs to be initiated both on the EU level as well as on national level. So how can we adapt our mobility to what is going to happen in the future? And we should change our base logic of thinking from infrastructure-based thinking towards mobility-based thinking. Second question has to do with the Eurovignette directive. Is the current idea that every member state should be able to tax heavy vehicles?
And Commissioner, and I'm sure that Karima, you would also like to reply short, please. Let's start with you. Yes, please, Karima.
Alors, je vous invite à ce qu'on se rencontre plus régulièrement. Ça, c'est la...
Yes, I think we should meet up more often. When it comes to short distances, then the question of the last mile is one of the most complicated questions everywhere in Europe. That is the reason why we need to make sure that sustainable urban transport would include in the planning process also cyclists, pedestrians. We should pay more attention to multimodality. So you are correct about short distances, but the situation concerning freight transport in different states is different. In the multimodal Europe, we need to distance ourselves from the road-based freight transport model. And when it comes to taxing heavy vehicles, then the Commission and the EU in general should move ahead. We are currently discussing this directive in the Parliament. I, as an MEP, believe that the income from those taxes should reach member states so that they could be deployed in different transport projects. In the future, member states should be able to use the income from Eurovignettes in financing their infrastructure projects. And to conclude, climate issues, global challenges are in front of us right now. We cannot completely reconstruct our transport system. We need to depart from what we have right now.
Multimodality already, so I will not spend too much time on it, but I'm inviting you. Next year is the year of multimodality, and we will be discussing a lot all the issues regarding the emergence of new mobility models that will be, of course, related then to all the emerging new technologies and emerging business models out there. But it is sometimes frustrating how quickly things are moving and what is the role of the regulator. That's why we're testing it now, and it's really working well. In aviation, we are now moving into innovation process concept. So Commission will be working in a parallel together with the industry and trying to tap into the new developments and be there already developing the regulatory framework and standards in a parallel mode so that we can shorten time to market. This will first happen in aviation. We hope to go to other modes. But there is another thing that is related also to the question from a colleague from Malta. Cities and also rural areas are subject of subsidiarity, which means member states are responsible for it. However, cities and especially mayors are asking us to coordinate some activities on an EU level as well. So we are taking these actions. We are creating platforms on an EU level where cities can meet, can exchange views, and through the innovative financial mechanisms, they have also now a direct access to financing of the Europe strategically important projects. Cycling is, of course, one of the most attractive solutions for the last mile. That's why we have we signed, all ministers of member states signed the declaration on biking under the Luxembourg presidency. We are picking it up this year. The Association of Cycling Organizations submitted the European strategy on cycling. We're taking it on board, and we will include elements of a European value into our future planning on multimodality in our future strategies. Last but not least, sharing economy models, cooperative economy models, greater value again of public transportation. All that is already included in our digitalization and decarbonization strategies. So please keep coming with the proposals. We need to keep up, of course, with the strategies that have a sustainable nature. And only with a really strong participatory approach, we will recognize what has a sustainable value and what is just a gadget on the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now, because of the home ground and because of the Estonian EU presidency, I'll give the last 30 seconds word to Minister Simpson to wrap up. Kadri, please.
Thank you, Henrik, for hosting such a great discussion, and thank you once again to the chairman for hosting this kind of event here in Estonian Parliament. And thank you all for your very interesting interventions and good questions. I do hope that the next session will be as informative, and I certainly appreciate this chance to be here with Karima and Violetta, and I'm looking forward for future debates with you. So have a successful day here in Tallinn, and thank you for being such a good audience.
Thank you very much. Now, if I may turn to you, I would also like to thank you all for your engagement, for your comments, your statements, and your questions. I think that the fact that, and the generosity of our chairman, also the fact shows that because we were not able to keep time, how important the topic is and how many questions there are. So I'm sure that there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. But before letting our distinguished panel to go, I would like to thank them very much for their good answers and for the interesting debate that they were managing to generate. And if I may ask you all to give a big applause to the panel.
Thank you.
And now again, Mr. Chairman, my apologies for not being able as a moderator to keep time. Over to you.
No problem, Henrik. You managed very well, and really, as you see, it was very interesting. And thank you, distinguished speakers and dear colleagues. I think it was quite interesting discussions here. Some of us mentioned Hyperloop. I just want to say that a very high level representative here in this plenary hall, Vice President of Hyperloop, and I think we will listen quite interesting information coming in on a third session. So, and before I close the session, I just want to say that we heard that the transport connections are one of the priorities in the European Union, and it's a key enabler of four freedoms of a movement as defined in the single market. So we have to bear in mind that our four freedoms in the treaties of the European Union really embody the intention of integration. Once more, I think it was a quite interesting debate, and now I'm closing the session. And before